and welcome back to another kick-ass new episode of the Burnout-proof podcast. Today, I had a different thing planned for today, but honestly, it felt repetitive and redundant and boring, and we're not going to do that today. What I actually want to talk about today is an idea that I had on my walk this morning. So yes, I am still in workout gear if you're watching this on YouTube. But the aha that I had on my walk this morning was about these system shifts that I have made in my life in the last year or so that have been game changers for me. And I'm using systems kind of loosely today. Obviously, we've been very New Year, new systems in January. I'm not New Year, new me. I'm New Year, new systems this January. And so we've been very systems focused to kick off 2025. I've been loving it. It has been so fun. I hope you've been loving it too. But what I want to talk about today is what some of those shifts are for me that have, honest to God, been game changers for my business, for my sanity, for my productivity, like so many things. And I am using systems a little loosely today when I say systems. I'm not necessarily talking about just like Notion or just tech. I'm also talking about kind of our routines and our schedule. For me, especially for business owners, I feel like systems encompasses a lot of different things. I think your schedules are a part of your system. I think your offer speed is a part of your system. I think your how you market is a part of your systems. I think, obviously all of the tech and how all of the tech fits together in your business is part of your systems. I think those are all part of your systems. And so that's kind of how we're going to broadly be talking about things today. Now, there's definitely things I'm going to be talking about today that are not impossible for somebody who is a corporate employee, but a little harder for sure if you're a corporate employee, especially if you are in a position where you don't have as much control over your schedule. So there might be some aspects that resonate, that would work for you, and some aspects that won't. But for my entrepreneurs, this is your call out, and I'm saying it immediately when we kick things off today. For my entrepreneurs, you are in control, okay? So a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about today, you can actually do. If you are building things on the side, I understand your time's going to be tighter, but these are all things that you can actually do and that I highly recommend you do because they have been system shifts that have been game changers for me and they have made such a difference. So let's dive in and start talking about the first system shift. And the first one is perhaps kind of obvious, but I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to actually link a number of resources in the description below that are going to kind of riff off of this and go into more detail on this. Shift number one is consolidating to Notion. I have been a Notion user for honestly 3 or 4 years at this point now. I have went all in on Notion in the last 2, and I really consolidated down a lot of my systems to Notion this past fall. I actually am going to link some episodes and some videos, whatever, down below that are all of the ways that Streamlined to Notion saved me money, how I simplified my tech suite. There's a bunch of stuff I did about this last fall that I'm going to reshare. Consolidating to Notion was huge for me in so many respects because it saved me time, it saved me money, and it really just made, I think the dream for a lot of us is to have this just single hub that we can go into every single day in our business. And I feel like for a long time, I thought it wasn't possible to have that because inevitably my business was going to require different components and there was going to be different things that I needed to access. I thought that, specialized systems were the way to go. That was actually another podcast I recorded this past fall that I'll link down below. I thought specialized systems were the way to go because they did their job so well. But the more I found myself spread across hundreds of apps, it seems, it wasn't hundreds, but it felt like hundreds. And the more I felt that way, the more I was just like, this is not it. This is not the way to run a business. I felt so scattered. I felt like, my technology was bogged down. It just was not it. So having a tool that kept everything, project management, task management, content planning, client management, all in one place, and being able to keep up with it in a way that didn't feel like it was a second job was exactly what I wanted and exactly what I needed. So I have literally not for 1 second regretted going all in on Notion, getting rid of my Honeybook and my other client portal system that I used and ditching Planoly and Buffer and all of those scheduling apps to just do everything inside of Notion. I have not regretted it for a second. It has been so good for my productivity and my sanity. I can't even stress it enough. So that's really shift number one. And that's perhaps the obvious one. Shift number two, which honestly, if you skip shift number one, you're forgiven because I talk enough about Notion. But shift number two is really creating themed days, or what I call my CEO schedule. I used to spend my day to day, my weeks, just chasing random tasks. Like my to-do list was the end all be all of what I was going to work on any given day and what I needed to get done. And don't get me wrong when I say that, like, I still have a to-do list. I still use a to-do list, but I felt like when I say it was the end all be all, it was just like this collection of random activities. And I would be ping ponging back and forth between content creation and client work and projects and all of this stuff. And it constantly felt like I never felt like I was moving the needle, and never felt like I was getting enough done. And I felt overwhelmed, and I felt like I was ping ponging back and forth between activities. It just didn't feel like a good way to work. Honestly, if I measured my productivity, measurably speaking, my productivity is maybe 25, 50% better than it was when I was operating like that. Like the amount of stuff I get done maybe comparably isn't super different, is what I'm saying. But how I feel when I work now and when I implement the CEO schedule is vastly different. I think that's the difference. You know that feeling when you sit down to start your day and you have like absolutely no idea what to work on, what's worth you spending your time on? That is how I felt day in and day out. And now I sit down to work and I pull up my systems, which I'm going to break down a little bit more for you in just a second. And it's so clear. Like I have such tremendous clarity on what I'm focusing on any given day. And I think this is a big reason for that. So when I say a CEO schedule, when I say themed days, this is what I mean. And again, this is a place where if you're a corporate employee, particularly a corporate employee that doesn't have a lot of control over your schedule, this might not be something that is applicable to you at this juncture, but maybe it is in the future. Maybe you can set your schedule up in the future to be more like this, but maybe it's a not right now kind of thing. But basically what a CEO schedule is, or what I call a CEO schedule, is it's having themed days in your week where you are doing certain types of activities in those different themed days. And this is kind of the really quick version of how I went about creating a CEO schedule. I essentially brain dumped every activity that I do on a week-to-week basis. I tried to get a little granular, but sometimes it had to be like big categories like client work or client calls or content creation. Like sometimes it was general categories like that, but I tried to break it down a little bit more in detail so I could really have clarity. And what I found was there were really, if I'm being honest, there were really like 4 buckets of types of work that my work fell into. Like on the business work, like kind of me putting on like my CEO hat and long-term planning and creating long-term strategy in my business, looking at analytics and metrics and making decisions about changes that I needed to make in my business. Like that was kind of a bucket. You could consider that. I used to consider that admin work, which is really interesting because that's like the freaking like drives the business work. But it felt like admin because it felt so secondary to everything else. I'm now realizing admin work is more like the like responding to emails and sending out documents and stuff. That's more admin work. But like I had work that was very much like driving the larger direction of my business. I had client work, which for me, because I kind of have 2 branches of my business, I kind of work with individuals. Like those individuals might be solopreneurs and entrepreneurs. So I kind of work with individuals and then I work with companies. But regardless of what branch of my business I'm talking about, I'm being so Italian right now, like, hey, all the talking with the hands. But I have these 2 branches of my business, and regardless of those 2 branches, inevitably I was doing client work is what I'm getting at. So I had my kind of business CEO behind the scenes work, my client work. And then I realized I had work that really related to outreach and connecting with other people. You know, I think you could even consider content creation that is content creation is essentially about you trying to connect with and build a community, right? So I had kind of all of this work that was community building related. And then I had like projects that I was working on in my business. Like, and that I think relates to long-term strategy, but it was like business projects. Like maybe it was building out a freebie or filming videos for an upcoming program or whatever it might be, projects. So I realized I kind of had 4 main overarching themes. And so what I did with that is I went in and I structured a schedule for myself that related back to those themes. My current schedule looks like, and there was a little bit of trial and error in there for sure. I didn't like nail it and get this schedule the first time, but my schedule as it stands right now looks like Monday is my CEO day. I have a meetingless Monday generally, which I kind of love because it's like a play on meatless Mondays and it just makes me happy. But I have meetingless Mondays for the most part. There are some exceptions to that. Like today, as I'm recording this, is a Monday. And I just was at a volunteering event on Sundays. So some of the students that I usually meet with on Sundays for my tutoring job, I'm meeting with today, but it's only like an hour and a half. So it's like chill. It's not bad. But I generally have no meetings on Monday. And that is like my deep work on the business day. That's Monday. Tuesday is very much a client-focused day. I have Burnout and Brews, which is my free weekly group coaching session, which if you are not registered, what are you doing? Come over and get registered. We do free mini group coaching sessions for 30 minutes, quick, punchy. We talk burnout, we talk systems, we talk Notion, all the things. So I do that on Tuesday mornings. And then it's usually calls, whether it's discovery calls, client calls, tutoring calls. Tuesday is a call heavy day for me. Then Wednesday is what I call my community day. So it's like, I don't know if I intentionally did it with C's, but it's C's. So I have CEO day, client day, and then Wednesday is community day. And the reason I did Wednesdays is because I do a lot of networking calls in my business, and a lot of those networking calls land on Wednesday. So Wednesday ended up being community day. It's when I go do my networking. It's when I do outreach and visibility, when I might do podcast pitching, where I might do podcast interviews. All of that stuff kind of lands on community day. Thursday is kind of another client day, but it's like client/projects is what I work on Thursday. I don't have usually as many client calls on Thursdays. It's a much lighter call day, so it usually leaves me space to do projects. And then Friday is kind of the like flex day, like the catch-all day, the catch-up day, if you will. I might use it for creative work. I might meet with clients. So when my week has that structure, and again, it's imperfect. Like I'm not so strict with this that I'll never meet with a client on Wednesday. Though I do generally protect my Mondays. My Mondays, like most of my clients do not have access to. The only times I'll have meetings on Mondays if it's for like some of the programs I'm in. Then I'll go to those calls on Mondays. But like I'm not so strict with this that I like never break this rule, that I'm never like working on projects on Wednesday. But what I found is when your week has structure to it, even just kind of these overarching structures, like these kind of rough structures, your brain can relax. And that's kind of what I found is it's so much easier for me to stay focused, to decide what the thing is that I need to work on that day. I've also kind of built it into my weekly planning. I'm actually going to be doing, especially for those of you on YouTube, I'm going to be doing a updated weekly review soon. It's on the docket. I'm going to get into long form content creation on YouTube, I promise. But like it is on the docket for me to dive into my weekly review process, because that's actually part of what I do in my weekly review now is I plan out my white space and what I'm going to do with my white space. I identify the top priority, most important things for me to get done on any given week. So when I sit down, I quite literally open up a page in my Notion system that is like called Monday CEO day, Wednesday community day. And that page already has everything on it for what I need to do that day. And it has created so much like freedom and decreased so much decision fatigue and just created like this natural flow state that it's so much easier for me to get into because my systems are supportive of it. So shift number 2 was theme days, creating a CEO schedule. And kind of the bonus side of that is setting up your systems in a way that supports that CEO schedule. Now, shift number 3 is actually also tied to what I just talked about with the CEO schedule, but it's about streamlining my schedulers. So I say all the time, if you can't delegate to a human, delegate to technology. And I think schedulers are like one of the easiest ways for us to do that. If you are an entrepreneur, or frankly, even if you're a corporate employee and you're not taking advantage of schedulers and you are emailing back and forth with people trying to figure out when you're both available, I personally think that that is a frickin' waste of time. I had somebody say once that, oh, they like the personalness of it, of being able to email back and forth with somebody and find a mutually agreed upon time. I mean, I feel like there's plenty of other opportunities for that personal interaction. I think you can set up your systems in a way that they still feel like you and they still feel personal. Like that just feels like a massive waste of time for me. So if you are going back and forth a lot with people trying to find mutually agreed on times, just make a scheduler. And the beauty of schedulers is they uphold and support your boundaries so that you don't have to. The only times I've ever scheduled meetings that were too early or on days where I don't take meetings is because I did it and I didn't have my scheduler do it. So like use schedulers, and we can set our schedulers up in a way that supports that CEO schedule for my entrepreneurs out there. I do not have anything in any of my schedulers where people can schedule with me on Monday. I don't. None of my schedulers allow you to schedule with me on Monday. I can go in and bend those rules because I'm the admin, but nobody, like none of my clients, no prospective clients, no speaking clients can schedule on Monday with me through my schedulers. So that protects my CEO day inherently. And honestly, that is one of the best things I have done for myself in the last year, is protecting my Monday and not letting people schedule on my Monday unless I decide we're going to schedule on Monday. So that's one of the things it does. It makes it so that people can only schedule certain types of calls with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then other types of calls with me on Friday. So like, for example, if I'm doing complimentary like Notion systems call, like somebody wants to know, like, how can I help them build out their Notion systems? They can schedule those calls on Tuesdays and on Fridays. That's it. Those are the only times they can schedule those calls. My clients, my like private coaching clients, my VIP day clients, they can schedule on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and for VIP days, I sometimes open up Saturdays. It kind of depends upon my schedule. I try not to because I work on Sundays for my day job. So usually I'll only ever open up a Saturday if I'm like in a very light season in my day job. I generally don't though. But like those can only be scheduled with at certain times. Podcast interviews can only be scheduled on certain days of the week. And so I've set those schedulers up to not only support my boundaries, like protect my personal self-care time in the morning, but I've also set those schedulers up to align with my CEO schedule. So like automating my schedulers is a very small change, but it's had a massive impact on my time, my mental space, and really making sure that I have the freedom to be able to spend my time the way that I want to spend my time. I think that's one thing that costs us sometimes as entrepreneurs or even as corporate employees, is when we let people have like free reign to our schedule, like schedule at any time, it means that we have to mentally task switch. We have to switch back and forth between the different, types of work that we do. And that's just not efficient for anybody. Okay, so shift number 3 was streamlining my schedulers and setting them up in a way that supports my CEO schedule. And then the very, very last shift, which is very specific to entrepreneurs, is building an outreach tracker. When I first started building my business, I feel like honestly, for the first several years of building my business, I didn't really have a good way to keep track of leads, to keep track of conversations that I was having, outreach tasks, especially with Notion and the fact that I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and building their Notion systems. Sometimes it can be the same kinds of conversations. So it's really, really easy to mentally lose track of who I was talking to about what. And I'd either forget or I'd waste time going through emails or DM conversations with people. It just was not effective. So what I've actually started doing is I have an outreach tracker inside of Notion. Now, this outreach tracker, it's really interesting because I have kind of 2 parts of it. I have a part where I keep track of contacts, and I have a part where I keep track of like leads, people who have expressed interest in working with me in my business versus people who are just like connections that maybe I want to collaborate with or throw work to or whatever. Or like, who was the gal I met that does Pinterest? Oh, that's this gal. Like, helping me keep track of those contacts. I do that separately than keeping track of leads, but it's all under this outreach tracker. And it's not necessarily a simple tracker, but when you like look at it on the screen, which for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and show it to you. It's a very streamlined flow to it. And it helps me keep track of who I've pitched to or who I've contacted, when was the conversation, like when am I going to follow up with them? That's something I built into my outreach tracker as a follow-up date, what the results of the outreach are, what stage they're at. It's even helped me like for entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out like how much, like what do they have in their pipeline? Like what kind of income are they bringing in? There's even a part of my outreach tracker that keeps track of that as well. I've also built this into, if we kind of throw it back to the CEO schedule from before, I have parts of this outreach tracker in my Wednesday community day page. So like when I go into Wednesday, because I'm already doing networking on Wednesdays, because I'm already making those connections, that outreach tracker is just like there so that I can use it, because Wednesdays is a day where I'm going to use that a lot. So creating that outreach tracker and knowing what information I need to keep track of and just having it all housed in that one place has made keeping track of new connections, new contacts, new collaborations, new clients so much easier. Like I cannot emphasize this enough. If you don't have an outreach tracker or a CRM or whatever name you want to give it as an entrepreneur, you are missing out. So one final thing I want to say before I wrap this conversation up today is that none of these shifts happened overnight. These are like even the CEO schedule, especially the CEO schedule. The first time I created a CEO schedule, I actually ended up not liking it. I had a content day in my CEO schedule, and I ended up finding that I was just creating content constantly instead of just doing it on that day. So I've streamlined that process a bit differently. I spend a couple of my CEO days each month creating content instead of doing a bunch of content creation throughout the week. Like my first time I created my CEO schedule was crap, and I had to redo it, and I had to rejig what days of the week I was doing what. So like this is an iterative process. I think that's something that a lot of people forget about when they're thinking about building their systems. These were small changes that I made over the course of probably a year, maybe a year or more. And I was tweaking and evolving them and removing things and adding things. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that systems aren't static. My systems are constantly changing. And your systems needs, the things that you need most right now in your business to really make sure that you are supporting yourself and your sanity and your organization, that's going to change. So just keep in mind that your systems do not have to be perfect from the start. They just need to work for where you are right now. And I know I talk a lot about VIP days and doing like full day VIP day builds. If that is something you need, if that's something you want, if that's something you have the income for right now, cool. Let's talk about VIP day builds. But something we could also do as well, if there's just a piece of your systems that you need to be worked on right now, and you don't have the finances or even the capacity to do a full-blown systems build, let's do what I call a systems audit. And basically what this is let's take a small piece of what you need in your systems right now and let's just build that. And then let's make a game plan for the things that you might need in the future. Sometimes just fixing the one part of our systems that needs the most support right now is all we need to start to get our feet back under us, to start feeling not so chaotic and a lot less overwhelmed. So maybe that is more of what you need. And it's much more of like a budget option if you are tighter on cash. We could build out, like one of my clients, I'm building out his client portals right now. And we might come back in like a couple months and build out some of his automations. You can take systems in steps. So if you don't have the ability to do a full-blown systems revamp, VIP day style thing right now, what is one thing you need help moving the needle on? And maybe we just focus on that. Maybe we just book a systems audit and we focus on that. I think this is something we often forget when it comes to systems, is that it is okay for us to build our systems over time. So with that, let me recap the shifts that we talked about. First and foremost, we talked about consolidating to Notion because duh. Second, we talked about the CEO schedule and creating themed days. We also kind of talked with that one about creating systems that support your themed days and how I have like pages in my Notion system for those themed days. The third thing we talked about was streamlining my schedulers and how I set my schedulers up to support my theme days. And fourth, we talked about building an outreach tracker, which is definitely a very entrepreneur specific one, but honestly, keeping track of new connections and collaborations you are making and people you are meeting. Maybe you do it on LinkedIn, but maybe you need a system for keeping track of people that you've met at professional conferences or something like that. The outreach tracker could be that for you, even if you are not an entrepreneur. So I hope this gave you some ideas for system shifts you might make in your business and your systems in general if you're not an entrepreneur. I hope you enjoyed this. For those of you on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For those of you who are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you are loving what you are hearing, do not forget to rate and review our podcast over here. It really helps so much with getting our message out there. And honestly, we all know somebody who is so overwhelmed, who are so, disorganized, whose life feels so chaotic that honestly, maybe they just need that little systems tweak, that little nudge in the right direction. So if you're thinking of somebody who you know needs that, who could benefit from some of these shifts we talked about today, send this podcast on over to them. But with that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and stay relentless, achievers. Bye.